great day and welcome to Logic Lives. Today we're going to talk about something that you probably haven't been taught in your lifetime, regardless if you went to college for finances, mathematics, analytics, whatever. Most people don't understand what we're about to discuss. And it's how to become wealthy over time and what you should do if you want to become wealthy, or what most people say, rich over the course of time. What we have been taught is not the truth, and that it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you save. You got a little bit of that correct, but the part of it's about how much money you save is flat out false. It's not about how much money you save, it's about how much money you invest. We will go through some examples just to keep it very basic and very vanilla. I will pull up the S&P 500 ETF, which is basically simulating the stock market because it tracks the 500 largest US stocks. And as they go, so goes the stock market. So when you hear the market, typically this is the top 500 companies that most people are talking about. This is an ETF, so it's not actually buying one share of all the stocks in the 500. It's just taking your money and evenly distributing it amongst the 500. So when you look at the S&P 500, pull that up. Just give me one moment. All right, I have that up now, so let's look at it. So remember, we're talking about the difference between saving and investing. So we're looking at the S&P, the market, and you can see 5 years ago. I'm going to go back 5 years. Should have stated that up front, but we're going back 5 years ago. If you look 5 years ago, September 3rd, 2019, the stock market, or this ETF, where you could have purchased a little bit of everything in the stock market, have one share of the total stock market, you could have bought it for $300. $300. So we'll start with roughly $300 as the beginning point. So let's say you had that $300 and you did buy it. You'll see, even though there has a crash, this was based off of COVID, you'll see that in the last 5 years, your $300 is rising, right? Because we talked about this before in lots of videos. The stock market, on average, since its inception, is usually around roughly 10% a year. So if you had looked, or if you would have had $300 and you would have purchased one share of the SPY, the overall stock market, you would have ended up with a value of today at almost $560, let's say. Got up to like at least 569, but from 300 to 560, that is a $260 gain that you made off of your money from 5 years ago. Conversely, let's take the same information and let's say we put it in a savings account, and that savings account was giving you 1%. We know back then you weren't getting 1% on a savings account, but I'm just going to make this super easy in terms of math. So let's say you were getting 1% 5 years ago. You put $300 in a savings account 5 years ago. Well, your 1% is not really 1%, because when you look at your 1%, you're going to see that that's how much your money is growing. But there's this thing called inflation adjusted returns, and that is you have to subtract inflation from what you gain in order to get the true interest rate that you're making on something. And so if you look the last 5 years, you would have made out pretty well in 2019, because that 1%, remember, we're going to subtract the inflation from the 1%. You would have actually lost 0.81% of your money 2019, 0.2 2020, you lost 3.7% 2021, 7% in 2022. That was a really bad year. And then you would have lost 3.1% because you're getting 1%, but then inflation's taking 4.1%. So 3.1% of your money. So when you look at the last 5 years, the inflation rate has averaged around 4%. And based off of that, your investment, if it went down 20%, you lost 15% of the value of your $300 sitting in the savings account. In current days valuation, that's going to be 15% less, which would be roughly $45 less versus what we talked about before, and that was investing your $300 into the stock market and seeing it rise up to 560 and making $260 more on your $300. And even if you adjust that for inflation, you're going to make out with a lot more money than you would have if you put it in a savings account. So again, it's not about how much you save, it's about how much you invest. So if you take that slogan, you take what you've heard and been taught your whole life, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you save. Scratch the save part or add. Let's just add because that's probably better. It's not about how much money you make. It's not about how much money you save. It's about how much money you invest if you want to be wealthy in your future. Hopefully you learned a little something. If you did, make sure you like and subscribe.